Welcome to the final installment on my Beatles song ranking video. Today we're going to be counting from 24 all the way up to my number one favorite Beatles song of all time. What a journey it's been. We're on the 8th episode and it has been a lot of fun talking about all this great music. So without too much more fanfare, let's get into the rest of my countdown, starting with number 24. Number 24 is actually going to be a tie. It's going to be Babies in Black and A Hard Day's Night. Now, Babies in Black, of course, was on the Beatles for Sale album in the U.S. It first appeared on the Beatles 65 album. And it's in waltz time, and it's got some great harmonies from John and Paul, reminiscent of the Everly Brothers. Just a great song. This has always been one of my favorites on this album. A Hard Day's Night is the great title track from the soundtrack, the album. It's a great segment in the film. It is a fantastic song. So much joy, so much exuberance. I love the fact you've got John who is singing the verses, and you've got Paul who is kind of chiming in on the little bit of the chorus there. But Hard Day's Night is just a fantastic song, as is Babies in Black. Number 23, I've Got a Feeling, off the Let It Be soundtrack. And this is the last time that John and Paul would share vocals. And it was actually two songs that were stitched together. You had Everybody Had a Hard Year, which was a demo that John had been working on since the White Album, possibly even earlier. And, of course, I've Got a Feeling was Paul McCartney's kind of framework for that particular song. But I love how you've got Paul and then you've got John. I love when they work together in the context of the same song. And I've Got a Feeling is a great rocker. It's been covered by Pearl Jam. It's had a number of covers over the years. And it is still a great song. Paul, as I've said before, this is one of his greatest periods. 1969, he was just on fire with his songwriting. And this song is no exception. Number 22, off the Revolver album, Tomorrow Never Knows, the last track on the album, but the first song that was actually recorded. A song that's propelled by Ringo's drumming. You have a drone there, which carries throughout the song. And then you have all these tape loops, courtesy of Paul McCartney. But it is one of the most fascinating tracks from that 1966 period, and a magnificent John vocal, which has been treated, I believe, through a Leslie speaker. The Beatles were big fans of pushing everything through Leslie speakers back in those days. But it's just a real hypnotic kind of a song, and it had to have blown so many minds when people heard it. Number 21, technically the last track on Abbey Road, The End. Right off from Carry That Weight, we get into that build-up. You got Ringo's only recorded drum solo, and then each of the other Beatles, John, Paul, and George, taking a turn at the magnificent guitar solo that ends the song, and then that little piano coda where Paul sings, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Perfect way to bring down the curtain on one of the most incredible careers by the greatest band of all time. Number 20, Blackbird from the White Album. Always loved this acoustic folky piece from Paul. One of his most gentle acoustic songs. I mean, what can be said about it? I've always loved Blackbird, and the lyrics, which were apparently inspired by the civil rights movement, but however you interpret the lyrics, the song itself is just gorgeous. Number 19, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the reprise. I love this more up-tempo arrangement, how they're kind of signing off at the end of this album before we get into A Day in the Life. Great drum beat by Ringo, and they definitely kick things up a notch. I mean, Sgt. Pepper, the original, was very heavy, but this is taking it even a heavier, more up-tempo clip, Absolutely love it. And I don't care that it's only a small little section. I absolutely love this song. Number 18, Get Back, classic Paul McCartney. Again, I said he was on fire during this period. Another one of these iconic Beatles songs that Paul came up with. It's very interesting watching the Get Back movie to see him actually developing the song from scratch. He just starts with a basic guitar riff and then starts adding just the Get Back refrain. And over the course of the Get Back sessions, John and the other Beatles help him fill in the rest of the lyrics. But what's not to like about this song? It's kind of got a shuffle tempo to it, and it works so great on the rooftop as they perform it as a band live for the last time. Just magical. Number 17, Birthday. And if you're a Beatles fan, you've played this for every single birthday of every birthday that you've commemorated. You've probably played the song, but it's a song that the Beatles very spontaneously composed and put together. They were in the studio. Paul had the idea for this song, and as they were running through it, they took a break and they went back to Paul's house to watch one of their favorite movies from the 1950s, The Girl Can't Help It, which featured many of their idols, their musical idols, including Bill Haley and the Comets and Eddie Cochran. I forget who else was in it. It might have been like, was Little Richard? I'm not sure, but those kind of 50s icons. It was one of those great movies that inspired them to want to be rock and roll stars. And so they watched the movie, and then they came back and they knocked out Birthday. And you can tell it's such a joy. They're having so much fun with that song, and Birthday is one of the most special moments for me anyway on the White Album.
Oh, prop man! Yes, Paul. Not you, Ringo, the prop man. Ain't you heard? I'm taking his place today. All right, then. This first number is a tender, romantic love song.
Number 16, Things We Said Today. And it might be a little curious that I have a song like this from A Hard Day's Night ranked so high, but I've always loved this song.
Did you say you're Cupid or stupid?
I've always been a fan of songs in minor keys, and I've loved Paul's vocals, and I don't know why this didn't actually make it into the movie, because for me it is one of the best tracks on A Hard Day's Night, but one of my favorite early Beatles songs. I just have to acknowledge how much I love Things We Said Today. Number 15, Day Tripper, with that incredible riff. This riff was like their counterpoint to the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction. They were released right around the same time Satisfaction came out first with that iconic riff. And then John came up with the riff for Day Tripper, which has inspired so many other riffs and other songs or riff. But it's just very cool. It's got kind of a mysterious, oblique lyric to it. It could just be about people who like to go on day trips, or it could be people who like to sit around getting stoned all day. Any way you interpret it, it is one of the classic early Beatles riffs, classic early Beatles songs. It was originally released as a single in the UK. In the US, it was a single, but we also got it on the Yesterday and Today album in 1966.
Prop man, you called? Yes, now look, this next sing-along number is a real torch song. Torch song? I've got just a thing.
Number 14, For No One, off of the Revolver album. And anybody who's ever been through a breakup, you've probably connected with this song. For No One, love the arrangement on the song. It had a completely different set of lyrics, which Paul then rewrote, thankfully, because having seen the original lyrics, and Paul's writing from the perspective of somebody who their relationship is in the toilet, and he's kind of thinking back and wondering what happened. In fact, there was a line in the original lyric that said, "Why did it die?" And so kind of looking back, wondering, how did we get to this place? How did we break up? But I love the horn solo from Alan Civil. I loved it. It sounds like a harpsichord, a little bit of Baroque pop, but it works so well. And I've always been a fan of this song. Number 13, the epic Hey Jude, one of the Beatles' longest songs. And it's hard to believe that this was actually a single in the day when most pop songs did not break the 3.5 minute mark. And here you've got Hey Jude, which goes over 7 minutes long, but that's how special the Beatles were, that they could have had a song 20 minutes long, release it as a single, and it would have been a hit. Paul wrote it for John's son Julian. He shortened it to Jude. He had been visiting with Julian shortly after John and Cynthia broke up and was trying to console Julian and wrote the lyrics of the song for Julian. John always suspected that Paul had directed the song to John about his new relationship with Yoko, but one of Paul's, next to Yesterday, one of Paul's most recognizable songs. Just a beautiful song. Number 12 is the flip side to that single, Revolution, one of the heaviest songs that the Beatles ever recorded. It started out as the acoustic number, Revolution 1, and then John kicked up the tempo and made it a heavier, much more aggressive arrangement. And it's fantastic. You gotta love Revolution. One of the first times that John is actually getting political in a lyric. It's such a masterpiece of a song. 11, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, off the White Album. George started this off as a very gentle acoustic ballad and then brought in Eric Clapton and they made it a much heavier song. Always loved this one. I like the acoustic, the original acoustic demo and the original acoustic arrangement to it, but I also love the full-blown version that we got on the White Album. One of George's greatest compositions, of which he had 4 on the White Album, the most he ever had on a Beatles album. Absolutely love that song. And speaking of George songs, number 10, Something, off Abbey Road. This is George's Yesterday. It's been covered more than any other George Harrison composition. Frank Sinatra even covered it and called it his favorite Lennon-McCartney composition. Whoops. But anyway, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous song. And again, looking at the Get Back sessions, that footage, you see George, he's got the melody and he's struggling to come up with the lyrics. He gets some help from John and Paul on it. But it's interesting that it took him so long to nail down the lyrics for this song. He didn't just sit down, come up with a melody and write the song. It took him a significant period of time. I mean, even when he brought it to the band early on in the Get Back sessions, still, it took him a while to actually finish out the song. I believe in February, he did a full demo with the full lyrics, actually on his birthday. And then the finished product appeared on the Abbey Road album. But it is just a classic Beatles song. Number 9, and yeah, weird that I had this one ranked so high, but I've always loved this. From the moment I heard it, it just blew my mind. Talking about Glass Onion off the White Album, a heavy, heavy John song. And I love how he's got lyrics there. He is name-checking some previous Beatles songs. He calls out Fool on the Hill, Lady Madonna, Obla-Dee, Obla-Da, Strawberry Fields. So it's a great nostalgic look back to some classic Beatles songs. And it's got another clue for you all. The Walrus was Paul, which all of the Paul is dead conspiracy theorists jumped on as another one of those clues. But I love it. I love the ominous string arrangement at the end. Sounds kind of like the soundtrack to a horror movie from the 40s or 50s. One of my favorite songs from the White Album. Number 8, another classic John track, I Am the Walrus off Magical Mystery Tour. This is the song that inspired bands like ELO, where you've got the strings along with the rock and roll. John wrote this lyric to confound one of his professors who presented Beatle lyrics to his class for interpretation, wanted to have a little fun, and wrote a total meaningless lyric. He took Alice Through the Looking Glass as the starting place for the lyrics, and then just threw in a lot of Dylan-esque imagery, which doesn't amount to a whole lot. He wanted to make it deliberately confusing, and it doesn't mean a whole lot of anything, but that's the way that John wanted it. He wanted to confuse people who were over-interpreting Beatle lyrics, but the arrangement itself is fantastic, especially as the song winds down. You've got part of a radio broadcast of King Lear. You've got some vocal chanting. So much stuff going on in that last 2-3 minutes of this song. It's entirely captivating and one of my favorite Beatles songs of all time, obviously. Number 7, back to George for Here Comes the Sun. This was a song that he wrote, I believe it was at Eric Clapton's house. He'd just been getting tired of all the business meetings, and the group was not getting along, and in the throes of breaking up. A very stressful period for George. And so he went to Eric Clapton's house, brought his guitar, and came up with this melody. Also the lyrics, and what you have is one of the most beautiful Beatles songs. It is George's greatest composition as a Beatle. It sounds timeless, and I can't say enough great things about it. Number 6, Come Together, the opening track on Abbey Road. This began life. John was commissioned by Timothy Leary, who was running for the governor of California, and had a campaign slogan called Come Together and Join the Party. And he asked John to write his campaign theme song. Well, John wrote a song and waited for Timothy Leary to come collect it, to come say, John, where's my song? Timothy Leary apparently forgot about it. And so John said, well, I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to craft my own song from it. And holy smokes, what a great song it is. I love the whole rhythm of this song. You've got John singing Shoot Me, unfortunately very prophetic. And you've got hand claps, you've got echo. The bass line on the song is incredible. Ringo's drumming. Hearing all of these parts in isolation helps you appreciate what a magnificent song this is. Number 5, back to John for Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And John insisted until the day he died, he never meant Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds to stand for LSD. According to John, it was a painting that his son Julian had brought home from school, and he called it Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. He had a classmate named Lucy, so he painted a picture of her, and John said that is a great title and worked it into a song. Everybody else said, a little too coincidental. Are you meaning to tell me at the height of the LSD era, it's just a coincidence? But John insisted that it was, and I have no reason to suspect that for all those years, he would have tried to mislead everybody about that. But nonetheless, I love this song. I love the surrealistic imagery of it, the keyboard melody throughout it. I love how Paul takes the chorus and then they all join in. I even love Elton John's cover of the song which John actually produced, but it's an incredible song, and there was no way the song was not going to make my top 5. Number 4, and yeah, I was a little surprised this made it into my top 5 as well, but it's a Paul song from Abbey Road, You Never Give Me Your Money. It can be taken as a commentary on the financial issues and disagreements that the Beatles were having at the time. But it starts out as a gentle little piano ballad a la Long and Winding Road or Let It Be, and then it morphs into a harder rocking song. And like Paul loved to do. He would take fragments of songs, stitch them all together, and make a magnificent song. And that's what he's done here. I love the closing harmonies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all good children go to heaven, as you've got that guitar soloing going on in the background. An amazing song, always been one of my favorites from Abbey Road. Number 3, I love the song from the moment I heard it. Dear Prudence off the White Album. It was written for Prudence Farrow, Mia Farrow's sister. They had all gone to the Maharishi's camp in India to meditate, and Prudence Farrow apparently got a little freaked out and tried to isolate herself. And so John was sent to try and coax her to come back and join everybody else. And so he wrote, this is one of the songs that he wrote in India. It's a very tender song, and I love how it builds. It starts off very gentle, but then it builds and builds into that crescendo at the end. Won't you come out to play? And Paul plays drums on this song. Not only does he give a magnificent bass line, but he also drums. So interesting fun fact, the first 2 songs on the White Album, Paul does the drumming, not Ringo. But just a magnificent song. My number 3, Dear Prudence. Number 2, Strawberry Fields Forever. Of course it is. It is the greatest single of all time, Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. John writing some lyrics evocative of his childhood. Strawberry Fields apparently was a Salvation Army home, which was near his house where he grew up in Liverpool. And this is a song that has about 300 demo versions. John spent more time on this song, writing this song, than I think any other song that he ever wrote. He started writing it when he was on location filming the movie How I Won the War in late 1966 in Almeria, Spain, and continued to work on it at his home studio, kept refining the demo, adding lyrics, refining the demo, and eventually presented it to the Beatles. I believe it was November of 1966, and they began working on it. And the classic story is they recorded the entire song, and then John said, well, let's try it a different way, and added the orchestration to it. But the orchestration part was in a different key and a different tempo. And John couldn't make up his mind between the original song, which the first couple verses that you hear is the old version, and then the ending part is so he stuck the beginning of part 1 and the ending of part 2 and asked George to patch them together to make one incredible song. George ended up slowing down the tempo of 1. He used some studio trickery so that the segue was seamless, but it is one of those magical Beatles songs. And ask anybody to name 5 Beatles songs, and I guarantee this will be one of them. And my number 1 song by the Beatles of all time, and you should know by process of elimination, A Day in the Life. And Sgt. Pepper was the first studio album that I ever bought by the Beatles. And I remember taking it home and listening to A Day in the Life. And a couple things that struck me were Ringo's drum fills on this song. I love the quiet acoustic guitar. John's voice on this song is so cool. And obviously, like everybody else did, that crescendo of noise that Paul and the band created. So much has been said and written about this song, and with good reason. That cacophony of sound where he instructed all the members of the orchestra, start here, end here, but get there however you want to. And Paul gives a greater description than I ever could, but I mean, it sounds like a rocket ship taking off. It is such a euphoric moment, one of the most euphoric moments on any Beatles record. And it, again, not that the Beatles hadn't blown so many minds with so many of their previous songs, but this had to have taken the cake. I've always loved this song, and again, I love how John and Paul took fragments of their songs and stuck them together. John had the framework for A Day in the Life, and then Paul had written a little snatch of lyric, a little fragment of a tune. The woke up, got out of bed, dragged a comb across my head, and didn't have any place to put it. And John said, this is going to fit perfectly in a song that I just wrote. And, you know, just like I've Got a Feeling, it worked perfectly. It was studio magic. And one of the reasons why the Beatles is my favorite band of all time. So anyway, that's my list. Hope you've enjoyed this journey with me, and I've enjoyed reading all of your lists and your comments about your favorite songs and my favorite songs. Whew, I'm going to go take a nap. All right, everybody, take care.